The mind is like an iceberg. It floats with 1/7 of its bulk above water. Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. The first human who hurled an insult instead of a stone was the founder of civilization. The interpretation of dreams is the royal road to a knowledge of the unconscious activities of the mind. The voice of the intellect is a soft one, but it does not rest until it has gained a hearing. Everywhere, oh, I find a poet has been there before me. Everywhere I go, I find a poet has been there before me. One day, in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. Most people do not really want freedom, because freedom involves responsibility, and most people are frightened of responsibility. Love and work, work and love, that's all there is. A person who feels pleasure in producing pain in someone else is a psychopath. We are what we are because we have been what we have been. Out of your vulnerabilities will come your strength. The ego is not master in its own house. Where it was, their ego shall be. Being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise. I cannot think of any need in childhood as strong as the need for a father's protection. When inspiration does not come to me, I go halfway to meet it. The goal of all life is death. The mind is indeed a labyrinth, but a labyrinth in which one can lose oneself as well as be lost. The mind is the result of the action of the brain, a separate entity. The act of birth is the first experience of anxiety, and thus the source and prototype of the affect of anxiety. No one who, like me, conjures up the most evil of those half-tamed demons that inhabit the human breast, and seeks to wrestle with them, can expect to come through the struggle unscathed. Anatomy is destiny. The fear of death is the most unjustified of all fears, for there's no risk of accident for someone who's dead. The mind is like a horse that must be ridden, not like a donkey that must be beaten. The interpretation of dreams is a great art. The only thing more unthinkable than leaving was staying. The only thing more impossible than staying was leaving. The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. Man's most important endeavor is the striving for morality in his actions. His inner balance and outer harmony depend on it. When you are in love, you are in a state of temporary insanity. Illusions commend themselves to us because they save us pain and allow us to enjoy pleasure instead. The neurotic is always trying to convince himself and others that he is better than he really is. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. The madman is a dreamer awake. The only thing I know is that I know nothing. Most people do not really want freedom, because freedom involves responsibility, and most people are frightened of responsibility. The great question that has never been answered, and which I have not yet been able to answer, despite my 30 years of research into the feminine soul. Civilization began the first time an angry person cast a word instead of a rock. We are threatened with suffering from 3 directions, from our own body, which is doomed to decay and dissolution, and which cannot even do without pain and anxiety as warning signals, from the external world. May rage against us with overwhelming and merciless forces of destruction, and finally from our relations to other men. The mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. The devil is not the prince of matter. The devil is the arrogance and the derangement of matter. One is very crazy when in love. The act of birth is the first experience of anxiety, and thus the source and prototype of the affect of anxiety. One day, in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. In the small matters trust the mind, in the large ones the heart. A man should not strive to eliminate his complexes, but to get into accord with them. The mind is like an iceberg. It floats with 1/7 of its bulk above water. Where it was, their ego shall be. There are no mistakes in life, only lessons. What we call happiness in the strictest sense comes from the preferably sudden satisfaction of needs, which have been dammed up to a high degree.